I'm going to be talking about something called the Land of Sunshine magazine.
I have never heard of that
Neither
before.
have I. If you've heard of this magazine, raise your hand right now.
Nobody? Nobody in this room?
Nobody? Huh.
Weird.
Interesting. Well, you're all being sent back to prison. This podcast is community service. You are my sunshine, my land of sunshine. You are a magazine that no one knows. It may not still be around, and it may not be the first magazine in LA, but Land of Sunshine was the first important magazine in LA, which means nobody remembers it. During the 1800s, San Francisco had a big magazine boom because at the time they were so secluded from the East Coast that they could make any sort of magazine they wanted without having to face the competition of the strong, well-established East Coast magazines, which they wouldn't have stood a chance against.
What, it was in New York City, the capital of the world or something?
I hate to break it to you.
I hope you break New York City. That's the reason for our podcast, is to break other cities.
We're slowly, my sensei always told me that if you punch New York City just once every day, eventually it'll punch back and you're going to be killed.
And it doesn't feel good.
During the 1800s, I just said that.
Time is a flat circle.
Remember how we said we are stuck in one gear in every episode? We're starting now. During the 1800s, so, seclusion. You can all relate to that. Yep. So they had a really thriving magazine in San Francisco around that time, the 19th century. Yeah. They put on their donkey skin hats and they walked across their donkey skin bridge, which it was made out of that at the time.
Smelled so bad.
Still does. So they had a really thriving magazine scene with things like Overland Monthly, but by the time LA was populated enough to justify having a magazine, that seclusion didn't exist anymore. So the advantage that came with the lack of competition was gone, and LA magazines had to fight and usually die against the more established East Coast publications.
Like Gallipoli.
It was a lot like Gallipoli.
It's like right when you came out of the trenches, boom, you were dead.
Gallipoli. Throughout the 1870s and 80s, a few local LA magazines came and went, but nothing of consequence except for in 1877 with the first LA magazine that was worth remembering, Southern California Horticulturist.
Oh, that sounds nice.
It sounds
like a lot
lovely.
of oranges on the cover.
So it came out monthly, and in my opinion, that's still too often for this horticulture magazine. There was the Porcupine that was put out by Horace Bell in 1882 that came out weekly, and it was like political corruption and injustices, but most magazines that were coming out around then were strictly promotional of the supple young town of Los Angeles.
Oh, I see. Boosterism.
Exactly. Like the kind of seat I'm sitting in right now.
Porcupine?
A porcupine donkey chair, which is a very dirty thing in some parts of the world. The early ones were powered mostly by the railroad companies who would use them to draw people in from out of town to buy the land they were selling, made valuable by the tracks of their own railroads. Cool. So the circle, capitalism is a flat circle.
It's also cannibalistic and carnivorous.
Ouroboros is a flat circle. Then when the railroad boom ended, this noble mantle was picked up by the various local chambers of commerce and business boards and hotel associations and immigration boards, that sort of thing. All groups who had a stake in the population growth of the city. So from this crowd emerged a man from Chicago named Charles Dwight Willard. Born in 1860, he was best known for being poor. And
I thought that was my claim to fame.
Sorry, he stole your lack of thunder. After he was poor, he went to the University of Michigan, and then he moved to LA in 1888 due to the other thing he was best known for, having tuberculosis. Another thing that you used to be known for.
The old TB Greg, that's what they called me.
Here comes Typhoid Greggy. He was one of the many seeking the clean, healing air LA is still known for, but on top of that, he was sick with another thing LA is known for being plagued with, being a writer.
Oh, probably at
another thing you're known for.
Ye old Starbucks or whatever. I don't know how old the phrase ye old is.
Your donkey skin latte's ready. Thank thee.
Dip in a pen and some coffee and write and stuff. Gross.
He was trying to charge his walking stick. That's the only reason he was there. Anyway, right after coming to town, he started getting jobs almost immediately, writing articles here and there for different papers like the Telegram and the LA Times and the Herald, where he started writing short stories about murder and suicide that were getting published in more well-read publications in the East and up north, like the San Francisco-based Argonaut. It's a little too Russian for me. No, those are cosmonauts.
I'm thinking of
Jason and the Argonauts. Yeah. Oh, that Russian spy.
I keep wanting to Harryhausen, but I kept calling him Himmler. I'm like, nope, not Himmler, Harryhausen.
I loved Himmler's animation work. He wrote one story about training an elephant how to read called The Fall of Ulysses. Speaking of Jason and the Argonaut.
Speaking of literacy, go ahead.
Speaking of references, that got published in the New York Sun, and I guess because it had an elephant in it, they got confused, and it was published as being by Rudyard Kipling. I don't know if that would help your career or not.
I don't really know. It couldn't help Kipling's.
Nope. Hey,
what the hell is this?
Elephants don't read. They just talk to little boys in the jungle. They don't read to little boys in the jungle. Through all this high-profile work, he became, pretending to be Rudyard Kipling, he became well-connected not just among writers and publishers, but also with local police and politicians. He was becoming politically involved in the things that he would write for the papers. He started being known around town as Citizen Fix-It, which I thought sounded pretty cool.
That's the worst superhero, but it's a nice guy to have around.
He can lead any size PTA meeting.
Fix my marriage. So I gotta go.
Apparently, it wasn't a compliment, though, because he was called that by the people in power who were sick of him trying to meddle in everything.
Oh, it's like sarcastic.
Citizen Fix-It.
Here he comes, Citizen Fix-It.
Oh, hi. In his first year in town, he was present for the first meeting of the newly renamed Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce to cover it for one of the papers he was working for, and he liked what was happening in this meeting so much that he vowed to become its secretary, and in 1891, he came just short of his dream and became assistant to the secretary. Now, here's where it gets weird. It also gets weirder to think about the sort of stories he was writing. So the man he was assistant to was his best friend, H.J. Hanchett.
That's a made-up name, but okay.
However, Hanchett wasn't very good at his job, and as we know, Willard was angling for that title. So I'm not here to start any conspiracy theories. But that same year, Hanchett went to Chicago, Willard's notoriously mafia-tacular hometown, and he went there as part of the big Southern Cali orange push to promote an orange carnival, and he never came back.
Oh, weird.
And nobody knew where he went, and nobody still knows what happened to him. So now Willard was finally secretary, and it was his job to attract health seekers and otherwise immigrants to Los Angeles.
That is conspiracy heavy. You have no proof? I'm into it.
He wrote, this potential murderer wrote tons of promotional leaflets and newspaper articles to this end of promoting stuff on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce. Yeah. And by 1899, he had done over 35 pamphlets that had over 1 million copies made. But that's like everyone in the United States at that time.
Yeah, they all had a thing.
But what we're talking about is what he started in 1894 with two friends of his. There was Frank A. Patty. It's Pattee, so I don't know if there's an accent mark.
There has
or it's
to
just
be.
Pattee. His last name turns into E.E. Cummings' first name. So there was him who worked with him in the Chamber of Commerce, and Harry Ellington Brooke, who was a British writer that came to LA in 1886 to write editorials for the LA Times and would occasionally write pamphlets for the Chamber of Commerce. One of these pamphlets he did in 1893 was called The Land of Sunshine, and it was so popular that they ended up printing 75,000 copies of it. But Willard saw it, and he saw, now that's got more potential. I'm going to murder this man. There's a nice orange festival in...
Why don't you go and take a long walk on a short orange grove?
There's an orange festival going far on that short pier. You might want to walk to it. Step in these cement shoes I just bought for you. He thought it could be spun off into its own publication, so in 1894 he invested $1,000 into doing just that, and the Land of Sunshine magazine was risen. Willard was editor, Brooke was a regular writer, and Pattee was their business manager. June 1894 was the first issue. It came out in quarto size, which is 9.5 by 12 inches, which that's like a normal magazine, right?
I think so, yeah.
Everything is AO normal?
Everything's just super usual.
It cost 10 cents an issue or $1 for the whole year. It was released under the F.A. Pattee Publishing Company with the slogan, an illustrated monthly journal descriptive of Southern California.
Nice. That should have been the title of the magazine.
That has its own subtitle, a descriptive subtitle for a descriptive magazine. They were being written at their headquarters in the Stimson building and being printed and bound by the Kingsley Barnes and Nooner Company at 123 South Broadway. The focus of the magazine was basically to tell people how great it is to live here. They wanted to attract settlers and businesses through articles, and they had like a lot of really good photos and illustrations detailing the virtues of the city and the surrounding area, and it was also meant to boost LA pride amongst people who live there. All 5,000 copies of their first issue sold out within 10 days, and they knew they'd be A-O right. Willard, however, had to keep his involvement a secret because his job with the magazine was to convince the Chamber of Commerce to buy it and distribute it outside the city, but it was also his job at the Chamber of Commerce to be the one to decide whether it gets bought or not. So he had to lie to everyone and covered up his conflict of interest, and that worked out A-O fine. What's a little conflict of interest to a potential best friend killer? But after only 6 months, it was becoming clear that this setup wasn't sustainable because not only was he busy at the Chamber of Commerce, but he also couldn't publish stories in the magazine under his own name because of the double life. So he offered the job of co-editor to a friend of his who also happened to be the most most qualified person in the city for this job, our old friend Charles Fletcher Lummis.
Old walkie-talkie Charles Loomis?
I'm gonna
walk from another state to California?
He walked across like the entire country.
He talks walkie-talkie. Why are you questioning that?
He didn't speak a word, though.
He's like the Native American from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah, he was huge.
Yeah, he was a tall dude.
What I'm trying to say is he would knock down water fountains. Loomis came in strong with his first...
He's knocking over water fountains.
He came in with the strength of a water fountain. His first article in the magazine was a celebration of the moral and physical virtues of Latinas.
All right. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
It consisted of 3 words, va and voom. But his...
Vava viva.
Viva va boom. His first...
Stop that.
Well, come on. What's your non-existent sister's phone number? Yeah. But his first editorial boosted LA as a city to be reckoned with and rang in the new era of taking it seriously. To grow the magazine, they did things like sending forms to subscribers that they could give to their friends and family to make it easier for them to sign up for their own subscriptions. Oh, cool. They also gave subscriptions to libraries all over the country, especially the East Coast, to boost their exposure and accomplish their specific job they were trying to accomplish, which was to grow LA, which seems to be what everybody's job was at that time. Yeah. They gave them to resorts, to different chambers of commerce and other areas. Passenger trains, steamers had them. By October 1894, 74 newsstands in Southern California carried Land of Sunshine, and Willard claimed that by then they were already outselling all other weekly and monthly magazines in LA and San Francisco combined.
Damn.
The January 1895 issue sold out all 5,000 copies in 3 days, and this was the first issue they had to print a second edition for. Wow. The 2 biggest newsstands in LA that month said that their combined sales of Harper's, Century, Scribner's, McClure's, Cosmopolitan, and Overland were 385, while Land of Sunshine alone was 527. Wow. In May 1895, the American News Company took over their distribution, and that made their circulation go even higher. They started becoming just as popular in Arizona and New Mexico, but even so, other magazines refused to acknowledge that they existed. Living a double life and having your hard work be ignored, this Willard really sounds like a relatable guy. Overland magazine kept claiming to be the only monthly magazine published west of the Rockies, something that Loomis very much hated. He wanted to walk all the way to San Francisco.
He'll do it.
I'll be there in 8 years. You'll be hearing from me. Finally, in October 1895, Overland magazine recognized them and pretended to be friends, but they can suck a locally grown Southern California lemon. Because that same year, Willard officially stepped down as co-editor and went on to do such things for the city as found the Sunset Club of Los Angeles, which counted as members names you'd recognize from pretty much any street you've ever driven on in the city. And he also started the League for Better City Government, which pushed for city improvements, and several other pro-rights groups like that. But with Willard gone, that meant that Loomis was now in charge of the magazine, and he set out to refocus what it was all about. He wanted to get away from it being strictly promotional fluff and to focus more on the local cultural and intellectual scene.
Did that go over well in 1895?
That was like a renaissance in Los Angeles at that time. They stopped killing Chinese people, and they said, I should read a book. I should rethink my life.
I'm going to read a book about killing Chinese people.
He said that the Land of Sunshine will be a magazine of Southern California first, last, and all the time, but it will realize that Southern California grows brains as well as oranges.
I don't know if that's true, but okay.
Oh, well, certainly there's one brain here.
Ooh, and we share it.
We're like the professor from Nightmare Before Christmas, and we both split the brain. Yeah. I'm left.
You always will be. I don't know what that means, but it sounded harsh when I said it.
Well, it felt harsh when I felt it. He made the physical size of the magazine smaller in June 1895 and switched the subtitle to A Southern California Magazine.
I like
Slick.
It.
He also started...
Vague, slick, vague.
Maybe threatening. He also started having a short story in every issue.
Oh, cool.
Like, that was his
Willard?
thing. No, this is... Come on.
Yeah, what?
Give me your half of the brain. This is Loomis. This is the time of Loomis now. In the early days, most of the stuff was being written by Loomis himself, who was known locally as Don Carlos. So to not make it look like one guy was writing the entire magazine, he'd go by pseudonyms like C. Arlos and C. R. Los.
You really wanted his name to be Carlos.
I'm Don Carlos. Bow to me. Bow to me. But eventually he started getting other writers to contribute, including names like John Muir and Jack London, who wrote 2 stories in the fall of 1992. They were both about Nirvana. They
didn't like him.
Why don't they have a wolf as the lead singer?
This forest smells like Teen Spirit.
So that was 1902. They didn't have much money to pay contributors around this time, so instead they offered them stock in the company, from which they never made any money. The makeup makeup of the magazine generally went feature articles, poetry, and stories, then editorials and book reviews, then some like official Southern California promoting, and then local promotions on the back pages. And then they had ads scattered throughout the whole thing, charging $13 for half a page, $25.60 for a full, and $50 to get the whole back cover. Most of the ads tended to be from hotels or real estate companies. By the end of their first year, they were running 13 pages of ads per issue. The next year saw 24, and in 1903, they peaked with 63 pages of ads in one issue. It's my favorite part
Yellow
of the magazine.
pages that they're giving out.
Yeah. Call this plumber for your not toilet.
Nailed it.
They sold nails too. Lummis wanted the magazine to be as specifically local as possible because he predicted that specialization will become a trend in magazines, which you can write into Dogs and Sweatshirts Monthly to see if that prediction came true. So he saw becoming specialized on this region as a way to not have to compete and fail against the big general magazines that already had big fan bases.
Yeah.
Like he's not going to compete with Cosmopolitan. Did that exist?
Yeah, you said it earlier.
Yeah, that's right. 50 ways to hide your affair with the chambermaid.
So many California chambermaids out here.
That was another magazine, California Chambermaid Daily. Made daily. Lummis was proud of the region he chose, the Los Angeles area, because it had a source of history that would never run dry. You hear that? We're never going to run out of podcast topics. Stay tuned for next month's episode on where they filmed E.T. Lummis wanted the magazine to be popular enough to live and substantial enough to deserve to live, which I've always begged.
Yeah.
That's all I ever ask of anyone. Please be substantial enough for me to not have to end you.
I know Willard. I know what he can do. Don't make me end you.
In 1898, they expanded their coverage to include not just LA and Southern California, but all of the West. So this led to more subtitle changes like a magazine of California and the Southwest to the magazine of California and the West to a magazine of the Old Pacific and the New. The LA County supervisors voted to pay for them to give subscriptions to East Coast libraries, and then in 1901, they got an investment of $500 a month for a year to help expand by Phoebe Hearst, who is William Randolph Hearst's mother. Not his wife, as I assumed it would be. Yeah. She's my wife. She's my mother. She's my child. She's my lover. They offered 2 6-month scholarships to the Throop Polytechnic Institute of Pasadena to the boy and girl who could get the most subscribers signed up for the magazine. So they just constantly,
handing it out.
Yeah, whatever could get people
Whoever
to
could
hold this thing.
Sell the most cookies with a magazine.
Yeah, cookies didn't exist then. Cookies was a term for a scrumpet, which means your chambermaid that you're sleeping with.
It was the name of the au pair that we kept hiring.
Miss Scrumpet's here. The July 1899 circulation was just over 9,000, which justified consolidating their headquarters and moving to 121.5 South Broadway, right in the heart of where all the other big publications in town were. In January 1902, in the final step of severing their birth ties to the Chamber of Commerce, they changed their name to Out West, which I kept thinking was another gay magazine that Los Angeles created, but it's not.
It sounds like a good one because it sounds like mostly cowboy themed.
Oof. Oh boy. Lummis felt that this was a stronger name. They were going to call it Pacific Monthly as a Western counterpart to Atlantic Monthly, so we called it.
Yeah. They were going to name it in a parody of itself.
Because there was Atlantic Monthly, which is now the Atlantic. It was their fun little way of balancing the country. But the word Pacific in titles was already overplayed even at that point, and Lummis felt that Out West reflected their new broader scope better.
Horizons, cactuses, mountains.
They still kept on every cover the words formerly the land of sunshine, so nobody would get confused. Yeah. And they brought in an artist named J.D. Gleason to do their new covers. They doubled their prices to 20 cents an issue or $2 a year. In this economy, they expanded from being a 260-page magazine to being around 800 pages per issue.
That's a novel. That's Ulysses.
Yeah, well, the Fall of Ulysses, the talking elephant story by Rudyard Kipling. That quickly got cut back down to being a more conservative 500 pages per issue.
Only 400 are ads.
Magazines used to be really big, right? Yeah. But when they were more popular, because that's all you had for the month.
Yeah, they were really big.
Greg is confirmed.
On what is it, the Internet Archive, you can go through old magazines and stuff, and I'm like, how many pages are in this?
800.
800. Just like
that's ridiculous.
Sifting through
Imagine
weird PDFs.
Everything used to be bigger.
Yeah, everything was from Texas because we used to all be Texas, so everything was bigger.
Texas.
Yeah, once we cut it off, it's like everything started shrinking down slowly. Now we have like little baby cactuses we put everywhere.
Now it's our movies that are longer.
How did you do it? You're so funny.
I don't know. I'm thinking of sending that one into Reader's Digest.
Conan or Reader's Digest.
I don't know. Whichever one gets back to me first. People loved this, though. The circulation at the end of 1903 was just under 11,000, but by the end of 1904, it was around 15,000. That year, they were now big enough to start the Out West Magazine Company, which relocated headquarters to 207 New High Street. By 1907, they had subscribers in Europe, South America, Asia, and New Zealand, but in the end, 1903 and 1904 really were their peak. In February 1903, Lummis already started letting in other editors to train them for the day that they would inherit the factory. That day came in November 1909 when little Charlie Bucket came.
They yelled at him a little bit. And then
Stop licking the magazines.
Once he put the free magazine that he stole from, or free, whatever, just keep talking.
The everlasting magazine edition. Is that what you're going for?
Yeah, and then they yelled at him, and then they said he got the job. Go ahead.
In November 1909, he cashed out of the magazine. He walked to whatever crazy thing. He did whatever weird thing he liked doing after that. Without Lummis, the magazine lost its soul because that was part of the deal. He had to take it with him.
I sold it.
It had really become an expression of his personality. He used it to push issues he cared about, like Native American rights, getting better city infrastructure, historical conservation. He translated a lot of important historical documents that were in Spanish and published them in English for the first time in the magazine, like Junipero Serra's diary.
Wow.
We knew that guy had a lot to say.
Yeah.
That's why it was 800. He wrote over 250 poems, stories, articles, and essays during his time there, including his regular editorial section in the Lion's Den. After him, editors like C.F. Edholm, George Wharton James, and Lanny Haynes Martin passed through, but the quality went down and down, just like the quality of those names did. In June 1917, they ended regular publication, and in May 1923, they jumped into the arms of their old enemy, Overland Monthly, saying, help me, I'm drowning. But Overland Monthly said, wait, I can't swim. And in July 1935, both magazines shut down forever, and nobody will ever speak of them again.